Deep in the forest along the Stanislaus River, a hiker might come upon a wood and metal structure called a flume. Though rebuilt and adapted to present-day needs, this flume and ditch system has been used for well over 100 years.
Gold miners built these flumes after 1849 to move water from the flowing rivers to the mines where they used the water to wash the gold from the gravels. The flumes literally wandered through miles of forest to reach the mines.
Through 10 to 15 miles of flume and ditch, the pull of gravity carried the water until it shot out of high-pressured, iron-nozzled hoses against mountains of gold-bearing gravels.
Though the gold rush has long gone, 150 years later, these flumes are still being used to transport water, but for a very different reason. And that's what our story is about.
The falling waters of the High Sierra drop from mountain peaks over 12,000 feet high. The water moves fast in its descent, dropping an average of 100 feet in elevation for every mile it travels. That steep gradient makes it possible to generate electricity at multiple powerhouses along the way.
Our hydroelectric facilities in the Sierra generate enough electricity to power almost 4 million households. The technology is simple. At each powerhouse, the falling water turns massive turbines, creating electricity. That electricity is sent over miles of transmission lines to PG&E customers. Hydroelectric power is safe, it's low cost, it's renewable. After passing through the powerhouse, the water continues downriver.
The discovery of gold in the Sierra foothills drew thousands of 49ers from all around the world to seek their fortunes in California. On every river, men worked nearly shoulder to shoulder, panning for gold. Soon, all the gold known as easy pickings was gone. The miners then began digging for gold in the foothills, further away from the river. The question was, how to move water to those dry diggings.
During the gold rush, the real riches came to those who figured out how to sell the miners all the supplies they needed: food, clothing, mining tools, horses, and especially water. Quick-thinking entrepreneurs climbed up water rights and started digging ditches and flumes practically overnight. Soon they were charging miners on every hill for water.
Water became almost as precious as gold. Between 1850 and 1854, over 8,000 miles of flumes and ditches were built. But hydraulic mining was terrible for the environment. Miners stripped the hillsides. The erosion sent millions of tons of sediment downstream, causing rivers to overflow and farmlands to flood. Finally, in the 1880s, the state Supreme Court took action, ending most hydraulic mining in California. Deep in the forest, the 49ers' vast network of man-made waterworks waited for history to turn its next page. The gold rush turned the tiny frontier outpost of San Francisco into a bustling port city practically overnight. Demand for modern conveniences such as gas lighting and later electricity grew with that city. In 1892, the city unveiled its first electric streetcar.
At the beginning of the 20th century, electricity was the new, exciting form of energy, and cities like San Francisco couldn't get enough. So lots of small local power companies sprang up everywhere. Some of them were reliable and some not. Finally, in 1905, many of these small power companies were consolidated into PG&E. And then just a few months later, in the spring of 1906, the great San Francisco earthquake and fire happened, leveled most of the city. PG&E took part in the recovery by helping to rebuild the city's gas and electric infrastructure. San Francisco even had an ambitious plan to roll out a new fleet of electric streetcars to meet the city's growing need for transportation. The big question was, how were PG&E and the city going to generate enough electricity to make all those bold plans a reality?
The answer to that question would be found 200 miles away in the mountains and forests of the High Sierra.
This huge piece of machinery is a remnant of a cable pulley system. It sits at over 7,000 feet above sea level. Modern-day hikers have had a pretty hard time carrying their 40-pound packs up this far in the high country. But 120 years ago, tons of equipment like this had to be hauled up with donkeys and cable winches to build a high-elevation reservoir called Relief Dam.
The dam was part of a great plan developed by Beach Thompson, an entrepreneur who thought he could deliver the electricity that was so needed in San Francisco. Thompson figured out a way to use Gold Rush-era technology, including flumes, to deliver water to a hydroelectric power station that he would build. In just 6 years, Thompson created a complete hydroelectric system. Relief Reservoir, his new high-mountain dam, would be able to control water release year-round. The water would flow from Relief Dam down the canyons of the Middle Fork of the Stanislaus for 35 miles until it backed up at a newly built sandbar diversion dam. Here, he siphoned a portion of the flow into a newly built flume. While the river continued its descent at a steep gradient, the flume carried the diverted water at an almost level run for nearly 20 miles, till the water ended perched on a mountaintop, ready to drop with tremendous force to the new Stanislaus powerhouse below. By now, the water would have dropped over 6,000 feet in elevation since it left Relief Dam.
The building of Relief Dam required the help of hundreds of workers overseen by supervisors and helped out by people like doctors and blacksmiths. And all those people needed to be housed and fed every day up at this elevation. Right over here we have one of the remnants of that occupation. This is the kitchen dump, consisting mainly of tin cans. These cans all date from before 1910. It's hard to imagine today because it's so overgrown and so many of the pieces of buildings have been removed, but this location was the hub of daily life here at Relief Camp. Right over there were the bunkhouses where many of the laborers stayed. And right here, if you can imagine, stood a 145-foot-long dining hall and small kitchen. And I can prove it to you because there's still a stove right here. Now, a lot of the buildings have been taken down, but something that couldn't be moved out was this iron stove. And you can imagine how hot it would be on a very hot summer's day, boiling in a small room with your cook stove cooking for hundreds of people. Beautiful up here, but summers were hot, spring and fall were probably beautiful, and the winters could be incredibly harsh. In fact, 2 of Beach Thompson's men were reported to have been willing to walk out all the way to Sonora, miles over snowy mountain passes just to get out of here.
Eventually, Thompson, like so many before him, went bankrupt. But before he lost it all, he built a key part of the power system that laid the foundation for what is still used today.
Our hydroelectric system is a mixture of the new and the old. Gold Rush era flumes and canals, modern day dams, powerhouses, and tunnels. Behind me is the Spring Gap Powerhouse built in 1921. The water takes an interesting route to get here.
Beach Thompson's plan used the middle fork of the Stanislaus River. Today, PG&E's hydroelectric system uses both the middle fork and the south fork. Starting at Strawberry Dam, which PG&E built in 1916, water flows down the south fork. 5 miles later, a portion of it is diverted into the Philadelphia Ditch and Flume that was originally built to supply water to a hydraulic mining operation. While most of the river continues rushing downstream, water in the Philadelphia Ditch winds through the forest at a very gentle slope until it arrives at the Spring Gap forebay on the ridge that divides the South Fork from the Middle Fork. It's then channeled into a large pipe called a penstock and dropped with tremendous force to Spring Gap Powerhouse far below on the Middle Fork of the Stanislaus.
This is a penstock. This has the water in it that flows 2,000 feet down to our Spring Gap Powerhouse, which turns a turbine, which generates the electricity. There's only one turbine in the Spring Gap Powerhouse. It's relatively small compared to the new modern day powerhouses, but after 100 years, it's still supplying power to our customers.
The Spring Gap Powerhouse is approximately the midpoint of the entire Stanislaus hydroelectric system. From here, the whole process is repeated, tracing Beach Thompson's original route. A short distance downstream from the powerhouse, PG&E is still using Beach Thompson's sandbar diversion dam. The water is once again diverted from the Middle Fork, but the flumes that Beach Thompson used were replaced by an 11-mile tunnel in 1939. Water arrives at the same forebay, ready to drop to the turbines at the new Stanislaus Powerhouse below.
We're at the Stanislaus Powerhouse, which is the final hydroelectric site PG&E operates along the Stanislaus River. The new powerhouse was built in the 1960s, but if you look off into the distance, you can still see the old foundation Beach Thompson built. This hot, remote site is now known as Camp 9. Beach Thompson built another village for his workers right here, just like he did 6,000 feet higher up at Relief Dam. It was complete with housing, offices, workshops, a clubhouse with a kitchen and rec rooms, and even a dance hall for employee-organized dances. Today, most of those original features are gone, but you can still find the remnants of the stone foundations of some of the original buildings.
On the Stanislaus River, PG&E works closely with its regional partners, like the U.S. Forest Service, to manage the natural and cultural resources found along the river. They work together to support recreational activities and provide safe operation of the hydroelectric system, while conserving the region's unique historical legacy. PG&E also partners with the Tuolumne Band of Miwok Indians for the stewardship of traditional places and things that reflect the tribe's long occupation of the watershed. PG&E works closely with the tribe to document, manage, and interpret these resources, which reflect the deep history of the Central Sierra.
Historic and prehistoric remnants are found throughout this river system. They're there for us to discover, to treasure, to learn from, and above all, to leave untouched. These artifacts are a window into our shared past.
Here at PG&E, we are as committed to protecting our shared heritage as we are to lighting the future.